So welcome everyone to Startup Show. Today we have Akira. We met yesterday when we had like an office hour with you. I was telling you about my startup that I'm building here, and I read about you, and you are VC in Fundomo. So I'd like just to chat with you, hear about you, your background, learn what we can see what we can learn from your experiences in VCs, common pitfalls that founders make, when they're raising funds. But also, let's just chat about whatever. This podcast we'll have to talk about philosophy, startups, and technology. So it's just a chill talk.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for having me on. It's an honor to be here. Especially here in Finland at Freight. What an awesome place that you guys have. You guys are very lucky to be able to be working alongside such smart people, and obviously yourself, to take a leap of faith to come out here to join a program that's new and, I guess a lot of unknowns, but so far I've been so impressed with yourself and everyone else I've met here. So it's been a fun couple of days, and yeah, looking forward to staying in touch and seeing what all the cool things that are going to come out of this cohort.
Hell yeah. And we have a lot of cool stuff happening here. Before we get into that, however, let's talk about you. Like, who is Akira? Where'd you study? What's your childhood? Who's Akira when he's like 5-year-old? And why are you doing what are you doing now?
Yeah, no, totally. So I grew up in the US. I was born in a town just outside of New York City. My mother is from Japan. My father's from Minnesota. So half Japanese. Definitely influenced a lot about who I am as a person and how I view the world. I grew up with my grandmother who only spoke Japanese to me. So living in a multicultural household definitely shaped how I think, how I behave, how I interact with others. I think, US culture is a stark contrast to Japanese culture in many ways, both on the behavioral side and like from a societal level, from like a macro lens down to a micro lens as well. So I'm very grateful to have kind of two different backgrounds that kind of contrast each other in a unique manner. But yeah, I grew up in the States. From a young age, was always very curious to understand the world around me. I think my parents definitely gave me a lot of freedom to kind of explore my curiosities and to, give me the agency to pursue them. Obviously growing up as an internet native Gen Z, I was born in 1999. This was my childhood was, we were blessed to have access to, personal phones, personal computing devices, laptops, electronics had, the cost of electronics had fallen so greatly. I mean, even since my childhood, but came at a perfect time to kind of satiate the curiosity of someone that truly wanted to go out and explore. So the internet was definitely an important part of my childhood. I remember I got an iPod Touch when I was about 10. Downloaded Facebook and Twitter when I was in 4th grade, which was probably a mistake in hindsight, but at the time I was just curious about what was going on, and these social media platforms allowed me to hear and chat with people who were doing different things around the world, and just gain new perspectives from where I was physically located. So, as a kid, I was an avid sports player. I played ice hockey and soccer and volleyball growing up. Athletics were always an important part of my upbringing. The discipline, the camaraderie, the teamwork, all these kind of intangible skill sets that I've gained through those experiences are extremely valuable to me, both now as a professional, but also as a person and as a human. So very grateful for those experiences as well. Went to public high school in the States, went to university at State University of Connecticut, where I studied civil engineering. My personal interests and hobbies going into university were very much on the scope of the built environment and physical world that we live in. Being half Japanese, when I would travel to Japan, I would see all these fantastic cities and across Asia, East Asia, frankly. I'm sure you're well aware of cities that work well, cities that are built for people, very efficient, clean, safe, very orderly in many ways. And I think a lot of that has to do with cultural aspects, right? People are very harmonious in many ways, ethnically very homogenous too. I think these types of things cater well to a well-functioning built environment, but at the same time, it's clear that it's the priority of the governments of these nations. And my thought was, well, why can't we do this back home? The U.S. has, at one moment in time in the early 20th century, had many prosperous cities, right? Cincinnati, is one. Detroit, cities that were both economically booming and socially had many interesting layers to them. But in the last 40 years, we've seen a stark decline as we've offshored much of our manufacturing. A lot of these kind of economic hubs located in the heart of the United States lost their magic and have been kind of hollowed out from within. That in combination with the rise of the automobile, right? The car is so synonymous with freedom and prosperity in America, right? Like you think of a car in America, you think of the music and the culture that come along with it. And in many ways, I think this kind of sense of individualism has brought the U.S. to where it is, but it's also left behind kind of this built environment that we've created for ourselves that is, defined by sprawl, where we have these, 8-lane highways that, separate these towns and these very segregated neighborhoods of white picket fences and big front yards, urban centers that are defined by large strip malls and parking lots. And it's very difficult for people to walk around and feel a sense of place and belonging in these cities and towns across the U.S. So my thought was, well, what are the ways that we can change this, right? And how can we make a built environment that's better for people, and change the kind of narrative that the U.S. is a very car and auto centric world, and we build our places for cars. So that was kind of my initial passion. I'd always loved math and physics. I thought engineering would be a great starting point, so I studied that. Public transit was always a focus of mine. How can we bring high speed rail to the United States?
Yeah.
We still have yet to solve that one, but during that time, I kind of realized that the bureaucracy of how we build in the United States physically did not match the speed at which I wanted to work, and I felt that my time and energy would be better spent aligning myself in a career path that would cater better to the speed and the types of people that I wanted to be around, the types of intellectuals, and find something that was much higher leverage than what I was currently doing. So that was kind of my spur into kind of what I'm doing now, and has kind of propelled me into a different path than what I'd originally kind of charted myself onto.
Very interesting. I actually read about you're studying in UConn civil, bachelor and master, but I didn't expect you to speak a lot about it. Do you think this current career of yours in VC will lead you back into civil? Do you plan to come back?
That's a good question. I think when I'm sitting on my deathbed and I look back at my life, and I think legacy is a difficult word and concept because there's so many humans. Time is so long. Humanity has existed for years and will continue to flourish for years. And what does legacy truly mean? But it's all relative at the end of the day. And I think when I look back at my life, I want to be able to say that I did have some influence on the physical world that we live in today. I mean, there are so many great digital technologies that we have exposure to that, many of us are prone to like moving into these kind of, more abstract realms, but we still all live in the physical environment, built environment. So, one thing I'd love to do is, make high speed rail reality in the US, help play a role in making cities that are built for people and instead of cars. I think it's an important trend that needs to be reversed. And, I do ultimately hope to leave my stamp in that way in some shape or form.
It's very interesting. It's interesting to me how a lot of our life missions that we slowly build and grow into are quite serendipitous, and we're sort of given to it by our environment. You seeing, how East Asia is very orderly and having a great civil infrastructure, but not in the US. And so it slowly motivates you into moving into that direction. And myself in the world of defense, it's quite interesting. I would love to talk more into that. And I can relate a lot into what your growing up feels like, because I'm also born in the early 2000s. And it's a very interesting time because we get to experience from having no electronics, no internet, and then having it. I think we're a unique generation that experiences that. I remember like the first ever video I saw in the internet. I think it was a Viva La Vida music video on YouTube on like a very old computer. And it was very, very much uh, influential to my next steps moving into computer science, electronics, and just realizing how big of this world is, this virtual world. But I do love the physical world more, and this is why I started mechanical engineering. Um, Sports was also a big part of my life. I did badminton a lot. My dad actually
Badminton is so cool. I love badminton.
badminton's fun. Yeah, people like to joke that this is like the most intense sport, which it's not, but it's very, very.
Oh, it is very fast. Very fast.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
They'll have its moment in the West soon. I think it's been very not only dominated by Southeast Asia, but I think badminton is due for a moment.
yeah, yeah. The fastest moving racket sport, the ball, is the badminton.
Yeah.
And skateboarding as well. But yeah, I grew up finally moving into mechanical engineering, and here I am building a startup in Finland and meeting you. So, what do you think? I was speaking with Liho. He was a Korean guy. He builds companies. He's in YC right now, second time founder or third time founder actually. And we spoke about this and how a lot of the motivations that we have into what we make our life missions of is quite given to us. We don't really choose about it. We're born into an environment, and that environment sort of, it gives cues to the people living in it on what is needed. For example, for you, civil infrastructure. For me, it's perhaps defense and safety and security. And we grow into that. Well, what do you think about it?
Yeah, I think we are very much a product of the environment that we bring in, the people that we surround ourselves in. Obviously, your parents, who you raise, who you spend your time with, the situational circumstances that you are born into greatly influence how you think and how you view the world. Therefore, giving you kind of a direction to want to head it in life. I think for many, it's not always obvious what that is. I think for some, it obviously clicks right away. You understand, okay, this is what I like. This is what I'm good at. This is what I'm good at. This is where I can make an impact on the world. But, for many, it takes a long time. But fundamentally, all these things are influenced by who you spend your time with, where you live, your environment, basically where you are in the world. So yeah, no, I think, yeah, the environment that you're in it makes you who you are. Like, I think here's a common saying. It's like, you are who you spend, the five most people you're a reflection of the five most people who you spend your time with. And I think that's very true. So, yeah.
What are some technologies you're quite bullish about these days? You see, you're exposed to a lot of industries.
Yeah. Well, I think there's some obvious ones. Artificial intelligence and robotics is definitely the hottest market right now. I think the leaps and bounds that we're making there, will truly shape the world that we know in a better way. Cost of goods and services, I think in the next decade will drop severely. If you think of agriculture, think of humanoids serving as, through a variety of different labor markets, autonomous vehicles, driving down the cost of transportation. There's lots of things that will kind of drive the world in a way that we could never imagine. So yes, it's hot right now. I think it'll be hot in 5 years, and I think it's well deserved that sector is hot. But in a world of abundance, I think, we should, as an investor, we should be thinking about, well, what are the things that are scarce? When everything is at your fingertips, what are the things that are still scarce today and still will be scarce in the future? So for me, things that I'm most bullish on right now, obviously, are things that I believe are necessary now, important now, but will also be important in 10 to 20 years. And this includes things such as commodities, natural resources, Bitcoin, things that are finite in the world that we know it. And that's where I plan on spending most of my time. I think, as the demand for these goods and services goes up, the demand for these commodities will also rise. This is a very secular trend. So I think that there is a big opportunity there, both investing in the commodities itself, but also driving and backing the technologies that will better facilitate how we find these resources, how we move them around, how we refine them, how do we turn them into their final useful form. I think there's a fundamental mismatch in terms of how important these are and how much innovation has happened in a lot of these sectors. So it's an area that I've been spending a lot more time in recently, and one that I'm especially bullish on.
Now, my question will sort of tie into the questions I asked in the past. We have, in the smaller scale, founders who are responding to their environmental cues on what they need to build in different places. And jumping up one level higher, we have VCs, which is, if you think of the entire humanity like a hive mind, VCs like the part of the brain which directs attention. Where should we focus, our money, resources, efforts into for us to develop? But who actually directs where the world is going? VCs are also responding to higher level cues, that they're seeing the market. And the market, the fluctuations, everything is like I'd like to think of it like the brain waves of the mind that is humanity. And so the developments that are happening, the market trends that are occurring, all these things, where does it come from? And where are we going? And who ultimately, or what ultimately leads the foremost direction, on where this world is going? We have people like Steve Jobs, for example, in the first layer is a founder responding to the natural cues around him. We need a better device. And so he made the iPhone, but that also cascaded into pushing other trends, the social media world now happening. And so it creates more trends. And so the world moves in a certain direction after the invention. And still we're responding to more cues of new things that will be invented in the future. So, and sometimes those developments are not necessarily net positive for humanity. And so we make mistakes and we regress. How much control do you think we have as humans in where this world is going?
I think as a collective planet, we have lots of control. As I think humans are an incredible species. What we've been able to accomplish in a relatively short amount of time is nothing short of incredible. So I think on the greatest level, we really can influence a lot of the outcomes that you and I get to live. But on a smaller scale, if you bring it down to the individual, it can be tricky. I think people are subject to the circumstances of their environment. Some are able to influence greater impact than others. Some have higher agency than others. Some, are subject to, the infinite amount of, randomness that we exist in our world. So, I think we, as a group, have a lot of power, but as an individual, it's really, it's a much more complex picture in terms of how much leverage someone can kind of exercise and the influence that they're able to generate on the world around them.
Yes, and I briefly was speaking about this with Teddy Donatus from the embassy in San Francisco and HF0. He spoke about bringing more SF mentality to Europe because, as an investor, as a market builder, he's trying to create this environment that will put the right cues to the next generation of founders in Europe. Because with the war happening in Europe, they have a higher sense of urgency to push innovation on things that actually matter because of necessity. In the last many years, they've been focused a lot on paperwork. It's classic Europe. There's this joke that Europe makes the bottle cap thing, sticks the thing to the bottle. It's quite annoying. While America builds shit that goes to space, self-driving cars, etc. What are your perspective on building such environments? Is it part of your life mission? Also mentioning about how you want to bring high-speed rail and all this, better infrastructure to America. How do you think we achieve this? And what do you plan to do on your part?
It's a good question. I think it's up to the individual to really determine and influence how they want the world to be. And I think this goes back to your previous question of like, oh, well, can we truly like determine the outcomes of what society looks like? And I think it's true. Yes. And I think it's up to the individual to really kind of exercise their beliefs on the world around them. I think entrepreneurship is probably the best way to do that. It's a way that incentives or structures are aligned, maybe not perfectly, but in a way that facilitates innovation that has outsized impact on the world around them. With regards to how I view my role in that, as an investor, my job is to direct capital to ideas and people that I believe will have outsized impact on the world around them, and that will kind of create a butterfly effect that can impact, influence, and hopefully bring what I view as good to the world.
With the rise of AI, we are seeing smaller companies being enabled. YC's been predicting, the existence of a 10-person team, trillion-dollar company. And I really can see that it might happen. What are your perspective on this? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it more complex than that? Is it going to happen? It is clear that individuals are getting more empowered, but because it's for everyone, does it cancels out? How will market the future change if there's less big companies, monopolies like Google right now, or Facebook, and we're having a more fragmented but numerous smaller companies who are solving very niche problems, but they all work together?
I do agree with the notion that there probably will be a $1 trillion company over time that's built by a small amount of people. I don't know if it's 10 exactly, but this idea that we can leverage artificial intelligence to be a multiplier effect on on one human's output is 100% true. How does that shape the world as we know it? I hope it would be economic prosperity for all, but I think it's a much more complex answer than just that. I think when we think about how we use artificial intelligence to create outsized impact, it will be a very fascinating and interesting time to kind of witness what people are able to accomplish. My hope is that we are able to make the cost of goods and services so cheap that a lot of the logistical things in our lives that we spend so much time on can be removed, and we can kind of revert back to kind of our innate human desires, storytelling, these kind of intrinsically human characteristics that are so special to who we are as a species. I think artificial intelligence will allow us to have more time to focus on these things. And yes, there's a concern that, people will get replaced. Yes, that's inevitable. When the wheel was invented, people got replaced. Every technological breakthrough or innovation, stripped some people of their jobs and essentially pushed them into new ones. Frankly, new economies were created. And my hope is that artificial intelligence is that breakthrough that allows us to kind of almost make society look like it did a long time ago in some ways.
And what is that?
Just a focus on the individual, the person's creativity, design, things that are scarce, like I mentioned earlier, will just become that much more valuable, right? And I think these intrinsic traits will be more valuable over time. I think a lot of people are worried about, how does AI affect artists when you have these diffusion models and AI generated video and text and what happens to copywriters, all these things. But I think ultimately those people, it's my belief that you won't be replaced by AI, but you'll be replaced by someone using AI.
The point on individuality is very interesting because during my talk with Teddy while we were walking out there, actually, we are increasingly seeing the world getting more anonymized, and influence and achievements being credited to big corporations and labels instead of the individual behind it. Back then, when we think of great people, we can name names, but now it's more of organizations. Like back then, Marcus Aurelius, this emperor, that emperor, this guy, Da Vinci. We have all these names, and maybe still these days we have big names like Elon Musk, where people can just think of at the top of their heads when you talk about, who's someone who's doing great things or something that's, influential. But mostly these days, it's kind of owned by big corporations. Oh, Google just released this new one. Oh, DeepSeek. Oh, this Chinese company did something that is impressive. And so the humanity is lost. And I feel like with the rise of AI, humans will push back or trying to earn back our own identities and dig deeper into what makes us human and express it out there. Also with, the amount of content creation and influencer out there already in social media, how do we stand out against these big labels and brands? And how do we stand out as an individual? And I think the nice part of having more individuals standing out is that people can aspire to individuals. So you cannot aspire, I want to be Google when I grow up. No, but you can say, I want to be like Da Vinci when I grow up. And so I think it's interesting that with AI, we empower the individual. And so more impressive individuals will come up and people can aspire to that. I don't know how true this might translate into what's going to happen in the next 5 years, but what's your perspective on this?
Yeah, I think the AI brings power back to the individual versus the corporation, right? I think you as a person can exercise just as much impact as a, quote unquote corporation has in the past as an individual. So I do hope that we can kind of return to an era where individuals are recognized for their successes and their greatness, as we have in the course of history. Because, I think it's a much more relatable concept and inspirational for many to want to look up to a person as opposed to a group or organization. I think we've been defined in the last 50 years of this massive economic boom, especially in the West, of kind of the leading companies that were driving that forward, and the economic value that they drove. But I think the tools that we've been developing and have created now kind of, like you said, turn the tide back and swing the pendulum back towards the individual. I think is a really special thing. So yeah, I agree with you.
And as an investor, how do you think individuals should pick a direction? Because I think, from myself, I have people who build companies around me. They're very philosophical. They like to think in first principles. That's essentially what philosophy is. And the thing is, you can only see so much further to the front and to the back for the reason on why you should pick a direction. For example, why do I pick defense? Why do you pick civil? Some of it is out of our control. And if we keep asking, like, why do we keep doing things, there's a scope of like how much we should ask, and maybe we should not ask too much, and then we just become too philosophical. It's not useful anymore. Yeah. And so, but in the small scale where we live in the scope of the world that we can actually interact and make use and be useful for, how do we pick a direction? How do we pick, I guess more pragmatically, a startup idea to work with? What market should we interact with? Should we write trends? What is your perspective on people writing trends? And yeah.
I don't think people should ride trends for the sake of riding trends. I think you get into perverse incentive structures when you're writing things that are hot just for this, being in a space just because it's hot, just because you want to be riding some wave, is usually not a good thing. If that's truly your life's work and your life's calling, then great. It's fantastic. Those tailwinds will help propel you to where you want to be, especially if it's hot sector. But, things are cyclical and, markets can turn against you. And if you're writing for the wrong reasons, then you're going to get washed out. With regards to how someone should choose what they want to work on, there's this Japanese concept of ikigai. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Yeah. Like to do something that you're good at, to do something that you like to do something that you think brings good to the world, and something that, can pay a salary or can sustain your living. I think that is a good framework for how people should decide what to work on. Because life is short. If you optimize too much for one of those things and not the other, you can start to tread into waters where you start to doubt, certain things about yourself. Well, if you're only chasing financial gain, there's gonna be a part of you that says, well, the money is great, but my heart is not aligned with this. Or if you chase something that you're really good at, but you can't sustain yourself, part of your heart will say, well, like I love doing this and my heart is happy, but if I'm working paycheck to paycheck, barely able to make ends meet, that will also, kind of weigh on you as well. So I think optimizing for the four of those things is really, really important. There's lots of problems that individuals can work on solving. and some are big, some are small, some are somewhere in the middle. But I don't think there's, some noble calling for everyone. I think it's fine if you are doing something that you think brings impact to the world, makes you happy, makes you money, and you're good at it, even if it seems trivial on the surface, like, you know, making cheeseburgers, that's a role as needed in the world and helps make the world a better place. So I think people should try to focus on those things, regardless of how they think they will be perceived for doing those things.
Yeah. What should we optimize in this world, right? That 4 points of Ikigai, they optimize long-term satisfaction, I presume. And sometimes that's not the only parameters. Actually, most times that's not the only parameters that are affecting our decisions. Sometimes when we're optimizing on those for long-term satisfaction, it's very hard. Maybe people are not born in a market that supports that direction of whatever idea checks all those 4 Ikigai boxes. Maybe they're not in a family, country, ethnic background. I don't know, all these other parameters that affect the likelihood of being successful in those 4 parameters. Should they still try to keep pursuing those 4 things, or what should they do? It's a hard question. I don't think there's like just one answer, but how do you optimize life?
That is a tough question. It will depend on the individual person, what they're looking for. I think we're all driven by unique incentives. Each person will have a preference for one over another, perhaps. But I think everyone is entitled to do what they want to do. I think that's what makes humans great, is that like we have all these tools at our disposal. We have all this learning and information and people around us that if you want to go for something because you believe it's the right decision at a right given moment in time, you should go do those things. You shouldn't be, you shouldn't solely be influenced by extraneous factors around you that are guiding you, or some mimetic desire to be someone who you truly aren't. You should just be yourself, do what you want to do. You only have one life and it's going to be over in the snap of a finger. So make it worth your time.
Make a good story.
Make a good story. Yeah, exactly. You want to have something to tell other people what you were able to accomplish. So
what about you? What's your plan for life? What's your strategy? What do you think a lot lately? What's your plans?
Yeah, I want to be a good friend and a good family member. I think there's a lot of focus these days on, well, how do I change the world? How do I create this like societal level change? I think those are generally good principles for people to look up to. I think the world will head in a better way if everyone's able to do that. I do want to, accomplish some of those things, but at the same time, like I want to be able to help and love those that are around me, those that I truly care about, my friends and my family. Because at the end of the day, like life will go by very quickly. And if you always try to optimize to help support people that you've never met before and overlook the people that are right around you, I think that feels a bit lonely and it's a bit upsetting to think about. Just being a good friend. I'd love to be a father one day. Be good to my friends, be someone who's trustworthy, reliable, someone who's, pleasant to be around, someone, who can help uplift those around them. Those are the things that I'm, trying to accomplish and what I'm trying to optimize for.
That's very nice. I think a lot of us, we're trying to pursue something big. They want to be great. They have big ambitions. Forget about the small things. And they just forget about the influence they have so much just within their vicinity, their family, their friends.
Yep.
And
I totally agree.
They lose touch. They travel the world. They travel so far, trying to influence the bigger world. But then the bigger world doesn't know who they are. The bigger world doesn't care who they are. And that's, I think, something that's very important and very personal also for a lot of founders, including because I travel far from home.
And fascinating, track that you're heading on. Coming from the largest, Muslim country in the world to Israel, working with different people, different walks of life. You mentioned, Russian girlfriend, like just so many interesting aspects to you that are very unique. So I appreciate, it's very, very refreshing to see someone who's willing to kind of challenge themselves and engage with people from all over, all walks of life, different backgrounds and beliefs. I think it's really important. Helps shape who you are and how you think in a very unique way that many people would never, take this path and try this path. So I commend you for that.
Thank you very much. I can see the same in you. I think you have a very interesting work and a very important work you're doing, directing the energy of humanity. Where should we work on next? What should we work on next? That's very important. But yeah, I think there's this one thing that my dad really left behind for me that left an impact. You should be able to talk to everyone. That's like the one advice he gave to me. You should be able to talk to everyone, prince or pauper, saint or sinner, whoever, male, female, young, old, left, right, whatever. And I think in this world, if you're able to talk to anyone, it's just unlocking so many doors, and you would be doing something you wouldn't expect to be doing before, travel to places you've never thought of, just because you can speak to them. And that really is something I remind myself always. And I'm about to actually go to Russia. I plan to go there in the next few weeks. And I don't know what's going to happen because, it's the war right now. And I don't have a direct path from Finland, even though it's very close, like 4-hour drive.
If you hike through the woods somewhere, I'm sure you'll find your
Hike through the woods, That's actually what I'm going to do. I'm going to go down to Estonia, go through a border by walking, literally. There's no like border for cars. You got to walk through, and it's quite scary. But a man's got to do what a man's got to do. Yeah. So, where do you see yourself in the next 2-3 years, 5 years, 10 years?
I guess in the short term, continue to work every day to build upon the skill sets that I have, both as a professional. So becoming a better investor, being much better at being able to find, pick, support companies that I work with. As a person, right? I think I want to become a better listener. I want to be someone who continues to stay mentally flexible on views and opinions, can be able to consistently change how I view the world around me. I want to always, ensure every day that I'm improving on these skill sets. So, how that actually realizes itself in the next few years is unclear. I don't exactly know what I'll be doing next week, even per se. But if I have a framework of, okay, these are the skill sets that I want to get good at, both as a person and as a professional, hopefully that will kind of guide me from a top level in what I do the next few years. 10 years from now, it's hard to say exactly, life is random and can come at you in many different ways, but, I'd hope to be building a family, being good to those around me, be someone who's reliable and trustworthy, as I said earlier. And yeah, go from there. I want to help support people achieve their biggest visions and dreams. So 10 years from now, hopefully I'll still be doing those things.
It's wonderful. I keep poking that question about what's going to happen in the next few years, 10 years, 20 years, because I was wishing to hear about how we want to explore the universe, Mars, and all these places, because there's a lot of these types of imaginations going around in places like, first of all, SF. People are very ambitious. People are very widely thinking about the world and how sprawling humanity can be in this universe. But I really respect and surprisingly love the fact that your answers are focused around, again, what we discussed before, making the biggest influence on the vicinity that we have, right here, and not trying to be deluded to think too far about how much impact or, I guess, exploration we can have out there in the world, in the universe, while forgetting what's just right here.
Yeah.
Are you more on the side of working on Earth and just fixing what we're having problems with in this planet, or should we go to space and explore? What's your thoughts on those?
Hmm. My answer is probably not binary in the sense there should be one versus the other. Like
That's a good
as
start.
much as I want to focus on where I am physically and the people that are around me and making sure that I'm being the best person I can be in my immediate area,
Mhm.
you know, these things aren't mutually exclusive. I also want, I have ambitions for the future of humanity, and I
Yeah.
think this idea that people can, think much greater than themselves and how can I influence the world? How can I change the world on kind of grand scales and grand timelines is so important for society. It's how we've gotten to where we are and how we will continue to get to where we are.
Yeah.
I think with regards to terrestrial versus kind of, endeavors that are beyond the bounds of the earth, I think we should be pursuing both, right? We should be trying to fix the core problems that exist today, every day. People are working on that currently. And then there's people that are also working on problems that extend beyond our planet and our solar system. I think for humanity to continue to flourish and prosper, being multiplanetary is kind of one of those core unlocks there. So I do hope that we continue to drive ourselves to explore what's outside of the Earth. Getting to Mars would be fantastic. Building a moon base would be fantastic. Exploring what's outside of our solar system would be fantastic. These are all things that will allow us as a species to continue to do what we do. So I'm in full support of everything that SpaceX is doing, Rocket Lab, all these other aspiring entrepreneurs who want to build in space. I think it's great. So I support them 100%.
What do you think about AGI? When I first met you, I asked about the movie Akira, if you've watched it or not. And essentially, the movie is about this group of scientists in Japan creating a super intelligence, biological, by doing bioengineering to some kids and making them in a lab and trying to basically create God. That project is called Project Akira. And what do you think about what we're doing here with AGI? Some people want to accelerate our progress there. Why are we doing that? And why are we so obsessed with the idea of creating this thing? And should we? And what will happen after?
Well, I think we should because it's going to happen anyways. I think our innate curiosity and our engineering prowess as humans will guide us to that level, regardless of whether you think we should or we shouldn't. Someone will figure out a way to get there, just because we're driven species and we're curious and we want to answer these questions. Like, oh, can we actually create a technology that is much smarter than ourselves, can think like ourselves, can behave like ourselves? We're going to get there. So I think when you keep that in context, we need to make sure that whoever gets there first is, doing it for reasons. I hesitate to say the right reasons, but is doing it in a manner such that is conducive for the general progress of the greater subset of people.
Mm-hmm.
It's a complex and tricky question. I do think that, I would much rather have someone who shares similar ideals to me get there first. I was born in the U.S., very pro-America for the most part, not always, but I would much rather have someone who shares those ideals be able to, have the upper hand on that technology as opposed to somebody else who may not share the same ideals and values as me. So I'm excited for, what it comes. It's impossible to guess what it will look like or on what timeline it will come. And I think anyone who's guessing is quite silly, actually, frankly. I mean, there are some certain people whose opinions I would trust more than others, but yeah, I'm generally excited. Like, humans do cool shit, and AGI will be another line item on a list of a lot of accomplishments that we've done. So yeah, what it looks like, I have no idea. How it will influence the world, anyone's guess, but it's gonna happen. We're gonna get there. So it's important to start discussing all the questions that kind of get spurred by what the introduction of this technology looks like.
Yeah, that begs the question, right? Like, do we do things just because we can, and so we will do it anyway? And if it's going to happen anyway, so let's just do it now and be the person who bring it to reality instead of someone that's not us, and then we'll be worried. Is that just how humanity as a organism, if we think of it that way, behaves? And if that's the simple function of what humanity does, do things, if fail, and then try again with no any direction at all, it always bothers me every single day. Like, where are we going exactly as a species? And are we perhaps doomed to fail? Maybe there's like this innovation that we are pursuing in the future, perhaps after AGI, or perhaps it's AGI, or something after that would cause the end of us. And then we will start again, start a new civilization. Who knows how many civilizations have started and ended in the past before our time? The pyramids, we don't know a lot of it about the history of mankind. Again, like when I said before, we can only see so much to the future and so much to the past. We're fixed in this like bubble. Is that just how things are? We will bring things to reality. If it is the end of us, it's the end of us. If it's not the end of us, then we just keep going. Because if you think about it in a small scale, in the microcosm, if you think about the smallest unit of life, you can argue if viruses are life or not, but like cells, for example, what do they want, right? The only thing a cell want, I think, if I would write a Python program for what a cell is, function cell, open brackets, keep living, reproduce, repeat. I guess that's it. Every single thing, every single cell in your body ever wants to do is just to live and reproduce. And that builds up with other cells turning into small organisms and finally into us, these more complex creatures. I think that single, 4-line program still persists. And if you translate it to humanity as a whole, it's kind of like that. We just do things and we fail, we just fail.
We're awfully resilient as a creature. And awfully curious. So I think, we're going to do shit just because people can do stuff. And, the outcomes may be good, the outcomes may be bad. There's a band of outcomes in the middle of those two. But I think for the most part, if we do stumble upon a big mistake, there's a probability curve that it ends us all for good. But I'd like to think that due to our resilience, it's probably not the case. And, someone will figure something out and we'll continue onwards. And it may look vastly different than what it is right now and where we're living today or all these other things. But, our ability to stay alive, like you said, and want to multiply and continue life as we know it, is very strong and innate to who we are. It picks up everything inside of us. So, we're going to continue doing it, I think.
Life finds a way out.
Yeah, exactly.
What sort of things you can talk like endlessly about? Like what sort of ideas, you don't think a lot of people share, but you hold it very deeply? Perhaps motivated by like books you read or like movies you watch.
Yeah.
For example, myself, I'm very sci-fi guy.
Yeah.
Dune universe kind of. That's me.
Yeah. I am lacking proficiency in fiction, in science fiction specifically. I think it's probably a big blind spot of mine and one that I should read up more on. I do spend a lot of my time thinking. I read a lot of nonfiction. I read a lot of things with regards to geopolitics, how different nation states interact with one another, the current dynamics that we have in our world today. I use it for the basis of a lot of my thinking and how I view the world, both personally, but also through my career. The macro influences that drive a lot of the investments that I make and the people that I decide to partner with. So I do spend a lot of time. I think we're entering a really interesting time, an era of, kind of Pax Americana, this kind of global harmony that we've, been living through for the last 5 or 6 decades is coming to an end, I believe. And with that will become, many pros, many cons, good things, bad things. But it is a change where we are 100% at an inflection point right now. The world order is changing fast. We're seeing China excel in ways we probably couldn't imagine 20 years ago. But the West and their kind of hegemony of control over the world as we know it is not the same as it was. And what that brings, there's infinite discussions and conversation topics. So that's where I kind of spend a lot of my time thinking about is how this changing global order affects everything else around it.
Let's talk about that. When we think about like what the future of nation states will look like, I have this thesis that right now we have so much, well, not so much, very little actual influencers in the world. We have, you know, big countries like the US, China, Russia making most of the decisions, and they're like basically just the decision makers on Earth, perhaps. But talking back into like AI bringing power back to an individual, I think on the mid level, I'm guessing we're going to see more smaller countries, more tribal, more fragmented ideologies. We'll be able to explore a more diverse way of thinking, because right now the world is quite monogamous because we're so centralized in these big powers. But in the future, when individuals have more power, in the mid level, we're also going to see smaller nation states having a lot of influence, like the Middle Ages. What do you think about that?
I think we're headed that way, 100%. I think the internet, although it hasn't fully taken form yet, has created a conduit for people to kind of fragment based more so on ideology, personal preferences, beliefs in a way that was never possible before. You can, even freight, right? You look at freight, right? It's like you considered it a state in itself. It's a collection of people that were attracted here through the internet. Right? You probably found out about freight online, and your rest of the cohort as well. You aligned on this view of the world and how how you wanted to work, how you wanted to live. Everything was made sense for you here, so you aggregated here in this physical place. I think that same could be said for a lot of different ideologies or ways of living, and the internet has produced that. And how the internet will allow people to congregate based on a shared sense of values and beliefs is something that will result in kind of a more fragmentation of these so-called nation state paradigm that we've kind of boxed ourselves into for a bit. So yeah, I think states will become more competitive with each other. I think you look at special economic zones of countries, providing areas for people to kind of innovate, both politically but technologically as well, will allow people to, kind of have the opportunity in some cases to remove themselves physically or by association of the place that they were born with. And I think that introduces a lot of interesting outcomes. So what it will look like in 10, 100, 1,000 years, unsure, but we now have these tools that allow us to kind of aggregate in ways that was kind of inconceivable beforehand.
How do you think founders should, and maybe we can use this to like close because we're going to have a demo in 15 minutes.
Let's go.
What do you think, and how do you think founders should position themselves in this increasingly rapidly changing environment? What sort of pointers they should keep in touch and just keep close to heart to make sure, whatever they're doing, is in the best interest of the world, but also, will be successful, in because this, and how should they navigate the increasingly changing world? What are some pointers you would leave for founders?
Be thoughtful in everything you do. Be able to look at every opportunity and every decision with a focus on, why am I doing something? What are the upsides? What are the downsides? Be able to quickly build a case for doing something, but also steelman the argument itself. Being incredibly thoughtful is truly important. So that's one of my strongest recommendations. Be bold. Be willing to take risks. If you don't take risks, then you will stay stagnant. And if you're trying to build a generational business or company, staying stagnant is death. So, taking risks calculated when necessary is very important. So I think those would be the two most important things right now. How you get your business to where you want to be, can look, can happen in a million different ways, right? I think a lot of founders are convinced that they need to follow a prescribed set of instructions to get them to where they need to be. They need to follow some path that's been paved by people before them. But I think that couldn't be farther from the case. I think people that will ultimately be the most quote unquote successful are the ones that are able to kind of take the path less traveled, to think outside of themselves, to expand what it means to build a generational company in today's day and age. I think those will actually end up being the best outcomes. So I think I encourage people to be clever about how they go about building their business, be thoughtful, and be bold.
I love that you said the path less traveled, because that's my motto in life.
There you go.
I love that, Akira. Hey, it's been fun.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It's been great. I appreciate the conversation. It's a lot of fun. We'll have to do it again soon.
Hell yeah. Thanks for coming. Of course. There you go.
Oh yeah.
Nice.